Imagine living in a world where your entire existence depends on mastering life 40 feet above the ground, where one wrong move means death, and where the forest canopy is both your home and your highway. 8.8 million years ago, our earliest ancestors had perfected an incredible survival system in the dense African forests that would make today's extreme athletes look like beginners. If you're curious about how these remarkable creatures thrived in one of Earth's most challenging environments, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we're about to explore the amazing world of our forest-dwelling ancestors. Welcome back. Today, we're journeying to 8.8 million years ago, deep into the late Miocene epoch, when our ancestors were still primarily forest dwellers, living lives that were dramatically different from anything we can imagine today. This period represents the final chapter of our lineage's life in the trees, just before the environmental changes that would eventually drive us to the ground. In this video, we'll explore how these ancient forest specialists survived in dense woodland environments that covered much of Africa. We'll discover their incredible adaptations for canopy life, examine the sophisticated social systems that helped them thrive, and uncover the archaeological evidence that reveals their remarkable survival strategies. What makes this period especially intriguing is that we're looking at the last generation of our ancestors who were truly adapted to forest life. These creatures possessed abilities and instincts that we've completely lost, yet their survival strategies laid the groundwork for everything that would follow in human evolution. Let me transport you back to Earth, 8.8 million years ago during the late Miocene period. The planet was in the midst of a gradual cooling trend, but temperatures were still 2 to 3 degrees warmer than today. This created ideal conditions for extensive forest systems that covered much of Africa, Europe, and Asia. Africa, during this period, was radically different from the continent we know today. Dense tropical forests stretched from the Atlantic coast to the emerging highlands of the East African Rift. The Sahara Desert didn't exist, replaced instead by woodland and forest systems. Rivers were larger and more numerous, creating a network of forest corridors that connected distant regions. Our ancestors during this time belonged to the late Miocene apes, with the most important being early members of what would become the human lineage. The critical fossil evidence comes from sites like Taros Manala in Chad, where Michel Brunet's team discovered Sahelanthropus chidensis, dating to around 6 to 7 million years ago. While controversial, this find represents one of our earliest potential ancestors. Another crucial discovery is Orrorin tugenensis from the Tugen Hills in Kenya, found by Brigitte Sanote and Martin Pickford in 2000, dating to about 6 million years ago. These fossils show a fascinating mix of forest-adapted and ground-adapted features, suggesting our ancestors were beginning the transition from purely arboreal life. The geological record shows that the East African Rift was becoming more pronounced during this period, creating diverse microclimates and isolated forest patches. This geographical fragmentation may have been crucial in driving the evolutionary innovations that would eventually separate our lineage from other apes. Paleoclimate data reveals that while forests were still extensive, they were beginning to fragment due to gradual climate change. This created what researchers call mosaic environments, patches of dense forest interspersed with more open woodland areas. These transitional zones would prove critical for human evolution. The fossil record from this period shows an incredible diversity of forest life. Massive trees like ancient figs and early members of the mahogany family created multi-layered canopies up to 60 meters high. The understory was populated by early relatives of modern forest elephants, forest hogs, and dozens of primate species that no longer exist. Carbon isotope analysis of fossilized plant remains confirms that C3 photosynthesis dominated, indicating closed canopy conditions where our ancestors spent most of their lives in permanent shade, navigating a three-dimensional world that required completely different survival skills than ground-based life. Here's where our story becomes both fascinating and mysterious. How exactly did our 6.8 million-year-old ancestors survive in these dense forest environments? And what can we learn from the limited evidence available? The first major puzzle is locomotion and canopy navigation. Fossil evidence suggests our ancestors had developed remarkable adaptations for moving through trees. Long, powerful arms with flexible shoulder joints allowed for efficient brachiation, swinging from branch to branch at high speeds. But unlike modern apes, they also showed early adaptations for more upright posture. Dr. David Begun's analysis of Miocene ape fossils reveals that upright posture may have first evolved as an adaptation for moving through tree canopies, not for ground walking. This challenges traditional views and suggests our forest ancestors were more sophisticated in their movement than previously thought. The second mystery is diet and foraging strategies. Dental analysis of late Miocene fossils shows evidence of incredibly varied diets. Tooth wear patterns suggest they processed tough fruits, seeds, leaves, bark, and possibly insects and small animals. But how did they locate and process such diverse food sources in the dense forest? Recent studies of modern forest apes provide clues. Orangutans, our closest modern analog for forest living, possess remarkable spatial memory, remembering the locations of hundreds of fruit trees and their seasonal patterns. They can navigate directly to specific trees kilometers away, suggesting sophisticated cognitive mapping abilities. Archaeological evidence from this period is frustratingly limited because organic materials rarely preserve in tropical forest environments. However, recent discoveries at sites like Lothagam in Kenya have revealed fossilized wood fragments that show possible modification, though whether by early hominins or other animals remains debated. The social organization mystery is perhaps most intriguing. Modern forest apes show various social systems, from the solitary orangutans to the complex fission-fusion societies of chimpanzees. But what system did our 8.8 million-year-old ancestors use, and how did it help them survive in dangerous forest environments? Predator pressure in ancient forests was intense. Large cats, including early saber-toothed species, leopard ancestors, and massive pythons, all specialized in hunting primates. How did our relatively small ancestors, weighing perhaps 30 to 50 kilograms, survive in an environment filled with predators specifically adapted to catch them? The tool use question presents another puzzle. While stone tools don't appear until much later, organic tools would have been essential for forest survival. Recent analysis of chimpanzee tool use shows they employed dozens of different tools made from plant materials, suggesting our ancestors may have had sophisticated organic technologies that left no archaeological trace. Now, let's examine the scientific theories that attempt to explain how our earliest ancestors mastered forest survival during this critical period. The vertical habitat theory, developed by researchers studying modern arboreal primates, suggests that three-dimensional forest environments drove the evolution of enhanced spatial cognition and memory systems. Living in a multi-layered canopy required mental maps of unprecedented complexity, potentially laying the groundwork for human cognitive abilities. Evidence supporting this includes studies showing that arboreal primates consistently outperform terrestrial ones on spatial memory tests, and brain scans revealing enlarged hippocampal regions associated with spatial processing. The seasonal adaptability hypothesis proposes that our forest ancestors developed remarkable flexibility in response to seasonal resource fluctuations. Unlike tropical rainforests with year-round resources, the mosaic forests of late Miocene Africa had pronounced wet and dry seasons, requiring adaptive foraging strategies. Dr. Richard Wrangham's research on modern chimpanzee behavior shows that successful forest survival requires knowledge of hundreds of different food species, their seasonal availability, processing techniques, and nutritional qualities. This suggests our ancestors possessed encyclopedic environmental knowledge. The anti-predator cooperation theory suggests that intense predation pressure drove the evolution of sophisticated alarm systems and group coordination. Modern forest primates have complex vocal repertoires for communicating about different predator types and coordinating group movements. Recent studies by Dr. Klaus Lubella on forest monkey alarm calls showed that some species can combine calls to create meaning, essentially forming primitive syntax. If our 8.8 million year old ancestors had similar abilities, it would represent a crucial step toward human language evolution. The Canopy Highway hypothesis proposes that our ancestors became specialists at using interconnected tree crowns as transportation networks, allowing them to travel long distances without touching the ground. This required remarkable spatial memory and route planning abilities. Modern studies of orangutan travel patterns show they maintain detailed mental maps of canopy connections and can plan routes days in advance, avoiding areas where trees don't connect or where predators are likely to be present. The tool culture theory suggests that extensive organic tool traditions existed among our forest ancestors, including tools for extracting insects, processing tough fruits, and possibly for defense against predators. While these tools don't preserve, their cognitive requirements may have driven brain evolution. Dr. Karel van Schaik's research on orangutan tool use has documented over 20 different tool types in some populations, with tool-making techniques passed down through generations as cultural traditions. This suggests sophisticated technological capacity existed millions of years before stone tools appeared. The forest fragmentation driver proposes that gradual climate change and forest fragmentation created selective pressures for increased adaptability and problem-solving abilities. Groups that could exploit resources in multiple forest types had survival advantages. Paleoenvironmental reconstructions show that late Miocene forests were becoming increasingly patchy, creating geographic barriers that isolated populations and drove evolutionary innovation. This fragmentation may have been crucial in separating our lineage from other apes. Recent genetic analysis of modern great apes has identified gene variants associated with enhanced spatial memory and tool use that show evidence of positive selection in the human lineage, suggesting these abilities were being refined during the forest-dwelling period. To summarize, life 6.8 million years ago represents the culmination of millions of years of forest adaptation by our earliest ancestors. These remarkable creatures had mastered one of Earth's most complex environments, developing physical abilities, cognitive skills, and social behaviors that we can barely comprehend today. Their survival strategies required incredible sophistication. They navigated three-dimensional environments with precision that would challenge modern athletes, possessed environmental knowledge that rivaled any naturalist, and maintained social systems complex enough to coordinate group activities and defend against predators. The abilities they developed during this forest period became the foundation for everything that followed in human evolution. Their spatial memory systems evolved into our capacity for complex planning. Their environmental knowledge became our ability to adapt to any ecosystem. Their social coordination developed into human language and culture. Understanding this period helps us appreciate that human intelligence didn't emerge suddenly when our ancestors left the forests. Instead, it represents the flowering of cognitive abilities that have been developing for millions of years in the challenging environment of the forest canopy. These forest specialists possessed skills that we've completely lost. They could navigate complex, three-dimensional environments, identify hundreds of plant and animal species, and survive in close contact with some of Earth's most dangerous predators. In many ways, they were far better adapted to their environment than we are too. Ours. The transition from forest to savanna that began shortly after this period wasn't just a change in habitat. It was the end of a way of life that had sustained our lineage for millions of years. The creatures who made that transition carried with them all the wisdom and adaptations of the forest world, which they would need to survive in the dramatically different environments ahead. What do you think was the most remarkable adaptation our forest ancestors developed? Was it their incredible navigation abilities, their environmental knowledge, or their social coordination skills? Let me know in the comments below. The story of human evolution continues to surprise us with each new discovery, revealing that our ancestors were far more sophisticated than we previously imagined. If you found this exploration of our forest-dwelling past as fascinating as I do, give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who appreciates the incredible journey of human evolution. Until next time, remember that the next time you look up at a forest canopy, you're seeing the world that shaped our ancestors and gave them the tools they would need to eventually conquer the entire planet.